Hello and welcome. Welcome to the For the Fans podcast, episode 111. This is episode 11. Here on a Monday night. Kevin McAdams alongside. What's going on, Kevin?
Well, it's been a nice Monday. I went to a really cool burger place here about 30 minutes from where I live, and they had apparently it's like the best place in Florida to get a burger, and they had that signature glazed donut burger that they always showcase on the internet that like gives you a heart attack and this and that. I didn't get that, but they had a waffle burger that was pretty similar, so I got that instead. So I'm hoping halfway through this recording that I don't have to step away for a bit, but we'll approach that if we need to. I know you were there this week. I'm used to it, but man, the hot weather was taking the toll on a lot of people, including the drivers. How did you manage?
Well, I just first remembered that I haven't eaten yet since probably 11 o'clock in the morning, so that burger sounded absolutely fantastic, and I kind of want one now. Um, I've always wanted to try a burger that had donuts as the buns, just because I'd like to get that like salty sweet mixture. But that's besides the point. I didn't eat much this weekend because it was so hot out, and I definitely didn't want to get like a stomach ache, so I drank more water than anything. It was hot. It was hot. I cannot begin to describe the amount of hot. I don't think I got sunburn on me. I think I got boiled alive. I because I do have some red on my skin, but I like wasn't out in the sun enough to get sunburn. I felt like I just was like boiling, like I was getting steamed in my clothes, and the steam was just hitting my forehead at a way that it was like making me look like a lobster. And it was hot. It was really hot. There was a tweet that Jerry Jordan had put out where after the Xfinity race there was a lug nut. There were two lug nuts that had melted into the sealant on the asphalt. That's how hot it
Oh
was.
my god!
It was hot. You walk outside and you're like, wow, am I in an oven right now? And then like maybe 2 minutes later, you're profusely sweating, and like maybe 2 minutes after that, your shirt's already drenched. And if you're not drinking water at this point, you might be passing out because it's that hot. I walked around the garage area, and to walk around the garage area is about like a 5 minute walk. And I took a lap around just to see what the teams were doing, see if anybody was around, looking to talk. And I got to halfway, and I turned around. I didn't run, of course, because then I would have probably died. But I like sped walk through the rest of the garage area to get back to the air conditioned media center because it was just that bad.
Well, I know that we're going to talk about New Hampshire. I got blisters from Daytona just because of the sunburn I got just for being out in the sun for 3 hours. I mean, I wear tank tops 95% of the time if I can outside, just because it's colder and nice and refreshing. But I know they did there was a big late model race at Langley, and CE Falk. If you're familiar with the late model scene, he's been around for a better part of a decade. They actually had to give him medical attention because of heat exhaustion. He passed out in the middle of the pits, and this was a night race. They ran that I want to say Saturday night. I think it was the same night as the IndyCar race. It was running at the same time, so I was flipping between that and the IndyCar race. But it was really hot, and it was a big topic all weekend. And there was actually a lot of discussions I saw on Facebook and on Twitter that it like these they need to suck it up and this, like people have died, people have gotten severely sick because of heat. So heat is no joke. So that's why I really do. I don't know how bad it was in the cars, but I heard it was a scorcher all weekend. So I'm glad to hear that you're fine, but I'm glad that you actually took preparations. But I know a lot of people don't. So hopefully no one got too badly hurt or got too sick up in the grandstands because I know it was a scorcher this weekend.
Well, there was a little bit of sad news out of New Hampshire. And I don't know if it was heat related or not. There's no unconfirmed there's like no confirmed reports on any of it, and that's fine because you really do need to give the family, the team, you got to give them a little bit of space right now to grieve. But the crew chief for Justin Haley, Nick Harrison, passed away on Saturday night, unexpectedly. He was only 37 years old, and from what I understand, he passed away in his sleep, and you got to wonder if the heat or the weather or anything like that had anything to do with it, because he was crew chiefing all day on Saturday. You got to think that it might have played a part in it, but like I said, there's no reports. I don't want to speculate on anything. Definitely, my condolences to everybody. All the relatives, all the team members, and all that stuff. You definitely hate to see it. I was, of course, a fan of Nick when he was crew chiefing for Justin Allgaier a couple of years ago. So it's definitely it's sad to lose anybody in the NASCAR family, but definitely a really big loss because he definitely he's been around the garage area, and you could see. Like in the whole garage area, the emotion on people's faces about it. It definitely was a pretty sad, day leading up to the actual race. Everybody remembering Nick and everything he had done. But, that's, like I said, maybe
It's speculation at this point.
it is
There's no way
speculation. I don't want to like link the two. But it could be. You never know. Thankfully though, they got the races in, and all the drivers were pretty they were actually I think it was Greg Galding. He had mentioned somewhere that Charlotte was hotter. So, it was hot. It was definitely hot in New Hampshire. But maybe it wasn't as hot as it seemed. You never know. But let's dive into the Xfinity race. Speaking about everything we were just speaking about, the Xfinity race was smack dab in the middle of a triple header on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
You had the modifieds to start the day, and then you had the K&N series to end the day. So you had that Xfinity main event right in the middle, and it was a pretty good race, I'd say. I really enjoyed the end of stage one because they were 3 wide to the line with Brandon Jones, who stayed out, used some pit strategy to have the lead on the final restart before taking the green checkered flag. And then you had Christopher Bell, who was the class of the field the entire day. And then you had Tyler Reddick, who he made his voice heard, but only at certain points during the race. He kind of faltered toward the end. But a really cool finish for stage one. The rest of the race, stage two, it was more or less the Christopher Bell show. And it was an okay race. It wasn't the greatest race.
I mean, Christopher Bell dominated it from looking at the stats. Holy cow!
Yeah, he led 186 laps of the 200 laps on that Saturday afternoon. He got all but one possible point for the day because of Brandon Jones winning that first stage using the strategy that he did. Brandon Jones was there were only 3 drivers who led laps on Saturday. Christopher Bell, Brandon Jones, who led the 13 laps he did with his pit strategy, at the end of stage 1. And then Ryan Sieg, who also used pit strategy to be up there. And he stole a lap away from Brandon Jones before Brandon was able to pass him back and go on to win that stage. So Christopher Bell, like I said, pretty much dominated that race. You saw more or less more of the big three. There was one point towards the end of that race where I thought Cole Custer had a chance. And we talked about it last week. Cole Custer's been on a tear lately, and he's got momentum on his side. Christopher Bell, he kind of just shut the door on that a little bit with how dominant he was this past weekend. But there was a point where I thought Cole Custer was closing in, and then they had a caution. And everybody knows that at New Hampshire, there are two good places to restart to have a chance at taking the lead on a restart. It's outside of the front row and outside of the second row. If you're on the inside of either of those two rows, you're probably going to lose a couple positions. And that's exactly what happened all day. Anytime anybody was in the second restarting position on the inside or the third restarting position on the inside, it ended up being a pretty bad time for them. The final pit stop, which I think it was the second to last caution, Cole Custer had he didn't have the best pit stop, but I can't say if it was on purpose or not, but he ended up coming out of the pits in fourth, and that ended up working completely in his favor. And that was the time where I thought he had a chance, because it looked like he was closing in on Bell. But then they had that final caution, an infamous now caution, because it was probably the only action of the day besides that stage finish. Harrison Burton and Paul Menard, they went at it after the race. But what happened was, leading up to the incident, Paul Menard was in fifth. Harrison Burton was trying to get around him. Burton hit him once. Burton hit him twice. Got around him. Paul was not pleased. Next corner, he dumped him. Took him completely out of contention. Harrison nosed his Supra into the turn wall. Came down, made repairs. The repairs were just... It was enough damage to make it where the car was pretty undrivable. And he went out there, put enough laps down to not lose any more positions to some of the guys that were, multiple laps down, like Chad Fincham and Joey Gase and Tyler Matthews, who were still running at that time. Harrison put enough laps down before he called it quits and retired his car to finish in 29th. After the race, though, he met Paul Menard on pit road, and they had a discussion. I would say I don't think either of them walked away any more happy with each other, because it looked like Paul was just like, get out of my face, and Harrison was trying to plead his case and was getting more pissed off that Paul just didn't care.
It definitely seemed that way when I looked at a couple videos online, and I watched the interview, not the interview, but the altercation. They showed a real far distance shot on it, and it just seemed like Paul wasn't really up for listening, and it's just really bizarre that he flat out just took him out. It kind of reminded me of the whole situation with Austin Hill and Johnny Sauter. I do think that Harrison roughed him up. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's definitely, this is a short track environment every time they come to New Hampshire. I mean, it's a mile long track, but I mean, it's 11 degrees in the corner. They're going about 95 miles an hour in the corner. It's very similar speeds to the likes of Richmond. They should have the short track mentality, and for either guy, it really didn't hurt their car. It didn't really hurt Paul's car going through the corner and bumping side by side. I mean, obviously aerodynamics mean a lot, but I really don't think it warranted being just absolutely turned into the outside wall. I don't think that was warranted in any way. So I don't understand that move from Paul, considering he's not there for points. He's a cup guy, driving for Penske. and it's just a really bizarre situation. I mean, we got a kid, an 18-year-old who's just trying to cut his way through the series, gain some much needed experience, and he's racing. And the way you get respect is you have to command it in these big leagues of NASCAR. You have to do that. You have to rough up the veterans and show them that you won't take it from anybody. And that's what Harrison did. I thought he drove a pretty good race up until that point. He was up in the top five for a lot of the first and second stage, and it's just really bizarre that I don't know why Paul took that high level of retaliation. I mean, I don't know for sure if he actually wanted to bump him out of the way and spin him. Maybe it was just more like, hey, here's your warning, and the warning actually became just the full on verdict. But there's no way to really know. I mean, it just didn't seem like if 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 Harrison went up to Paul and was like, "Hey, man, I really didn't appreciate it." And then Paul was like, "Oh, dude, I get it. I was not actually trying to dump you there, but dude, you can't be roughing up people like that in the middle of the race, dude. You're gonna get yourself in a lot of trouble, like what happened today." It just didn't seem like there was that kind of dialogue. It was pretty much Harrison yapping at Paul, and Paul pretty much a brick wall, not even really listening to the situation. So, I mean, it made for a very small portion of the race being pretty exciting because I wasn't. It was hard for me to listen to the actual broadcast because I was at work. Jeff Burton, I presume, was in the booth. I'm
He
sure he
was.
had his. I presume he had his 2 cents.
Actually, he was he was in the middle of talking, and it happened, and you heard Letarte and Earnhardt Jr. go, "Whoa!" And Burton just shut up at that point, and Letarte kind of took the lead at that moment and started explaining what had happened, and they played some audio from Menard saying, "He hit me twice, I hit him once," and Burton was actually pretty tame up there. They showed some video of his mother.
Oh, Kim. Yeah,
Of
Kim's
Kim.
always well animated. She was going crazy just for him going from fourth to third at some point. I always love watching her. She's really entertaining.
Yeah, but I mean, with the whole situation, yes, Paul Menard did overreact for sure. It was definitely not necessary, but that's a Paul Menard that I haven't really ever seen before, and I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed it slightly just because of his, he wasn't really giving any at that point. It was it was how do I explain it? It was really, he was cool Menard at that point. He was acting like a badass, and yeah, at the expense of Harrison Burton and all that, but it was both uncalled for, and it was really cool to see that side of Paul Menard because I haven't seen that side of Paul Menard before, and I wish he would bring something like that to the Cup Series. I wish he would have that type of mentality in the Cup Series. Maybe that might get him some better finishes. You never know. But I digress. I'm not really gonna go look at the standings because it's pretty much like we've said in previous weeks. It's already set because Gray Galding is more than 100, and he's 113 points behind Brandon Jones, and they have what, like 8 races left, so it's probably not going to happen for him. And Christopher Bell now has 5 wins. Cole Custer now has 5 wins. Tyler Reddick's still sitting at 3 wins. It's been those 3 all season. We talk about it ad nauseum, like every single time, every single week. Bell now has the advantage in playoff points. He has 36 playoff points over Cole Custer, who has 31. Tyler Reddick only has 18, but he's leading the points right now. So if he stays there, he could get an extra 15 bonus points, which would put him at 33. but Bell would get another 10, which would put him at 46 and give him the playoff point lead at this moment. And they're just going to keep getting playoff points and so on and so forth. So did you want to comment on any of that? Because I really don't want to.
No, I mean it's the same three. I am kind of starting. I wouldn't say concerned, but Bell and Custer have stepped it up, and Reddick's. I wouldn't say he's had issues. I mean, we talked about it at Kentucky. Did not have a bad race by any means. He was running the top 5 the whole entire day, and same thing here. Pretty much ran in the top 5 the entire day. But that's not going to cut it at Homestead. So I'm curious to see if they can step it up here the second half of the season because, like you just mentioned, Bell and Custer have 5 wins apiece, and Reddick's still at 3. He's going to have to do something to kind of match those guys as far as their momentum's concerned. I still think he's going to be the favorite just because I think Homestead's his track to lose. I do still think that. And it's going to take probably a huge drop off in performance for me to think otherwise. It's just, man, I really want a fourth guy to get in there. And I mean, we talked about Allgaier being that guy last week. He did finish 3rd, but it wasn't like he was up there competing for the win. We're talking about a margin of about 12, 13 seconds back to 3rd. I mean, Custer was 4 seconds back to Bell at the end of the race. So we're talking about just pure domination on Bell's part at New Hampshire. And it's been like that the last few races. I mean, Bell dominated the first half of Kentucky, and then Custer dominated the second half of the same race. So it's Reddick's got to step it up. I mean, I think they're all the favorites. It's going to be a huge battle unless one of them just completely just sabotages themselves going into Homestead. It's going to be interesting if they can rebound, but man, Bell and Custer, they are absolutely on fire. And I heard something happen with Kaz Gralla. I forget who wrecked him. Someone said I think it was on SRG, one of the Facebook groups we're in, that someone just absolutely dumped Kaz Gralla at the end of the race.
It was me.
Oh, you actually mentioned it. Okay.
Yes. And it's funny because history seems to repeat itself, but Austin Cindric and Kaz Gralla were getting into it again. For whatever reason, when Gralla, who was driving the 21 RCR second car this week, when Gralla was ahead of Cindric, I guess Cindric's spotter was getting kind of pissed off at Gralla being in front of him and basically went and said to Cindric, you've been nice enough, just, move him out of the way. So I guess the next corner, Cindric just absolutely used Gralla as a brake like he did that 1 year in Canada. This time it didn't wreck him though, but Kaz definitely got moved out of the groove and lost a couple positions. But Kaz was actually able to get back at Cindric because Cindric was he wasn't really that good this week, and ended up falling back into the clutches of Kaz Gralla, and they fought for a little bit more, but yeah, it was funny seeing them two swap paint again. Cindric ended up with a 12th place finish. Gralla ended up with a 14th place finish, and Cindric's, he's in the midst of a playoff battle. I don't know why he would try to make, his enemy even more of an enemy going forward when he's gonna be in the playoff battle. Gralla's really got nothing to lose. He could end up ruining Cindric's whole playoffs if he pisses him off enough. I'm looking at like the races that Gralla would have in the playoffs. I mean, he could completely take him out of moving on to the next round. If I don't think Kaz Gralla's that kind of driver, but you never know if you push somebody's buttons enough, and it's not like Cindric hasn't done that before with Gralla. It just seems like for whatever reason, they don't like each other, and it was proved once again this weekend at New Hampshire.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Cindric's got a name, got a what's it called, a stigma to his name. He certainly likes to dump people. He's had that mantra on him since Mossport a few years ago. So it's just added to the list, I guess. But I think you're right. He's he's not doing himself any favors as far as running to the playoffs because if for some reason Cindric starts to get some really good finishes and starts to become a threat, that 21 car is a teammate to Reddick, and I'm sure if they needed to, I'm sure they can put Kaz Grala in the machine again and get some revenge, quote unquote, on that 22 car. So I do think you're right that Cindric needs to tread lightly, especially with the big picture being a championship and further progressing in his career. I think that'd be a huge step for him to get. He needs to focus on that more and Kaz Grala less. So. I don't know. I just brought that up because I heard. I guess you're right. It was you. I just went back and looked at it, and I thought that was really interesting. And they didn't really talk about it. I didn't see it anywhere else. So it's it's interesting that they didn't mention it, considering they have history. So, but uh, I, I'm going to ask the same question that I asked last week. I already kind of gave my answer with Reddick. Who the way this has been going, who right as of right now, 10:29 p.m. on a Monday night, who do you have as the favorite going in to Homestead tonight?
I'm leaning less towards Cole Custer than I did last week. But I mean, it's so close between the three of them. I don't think it really matters what happens. I think it's just going to come down to who's going to be the best at Homestead. I actually think Christopher Bell. I think I just quoted him because I think he said the same exact thing. It doesn't matter right now who's got the advantage, who's got the momentum, who's got the anything. Christopher Bell could go into Homestead with 15 wins, and if he doesn't improve on his Homestead craft, it's going to be Reddick versus Custer. He's got to improve. He's got to figure out how to get around that track in a way that can win him a championship. So I don't know that my opinion has changed much from last week. I would definitely say a little bit lesser of Cole Custer just because Christopher Bell now has the upper hand. But I would still go with Cole Custer just because he's got the winning experience at Homestead Miami Speedway. And the only reason I'm not really talking about Tyler Reddick is because, as we've talked about already tonight, he's kind of like falling off slightly, and I don't know if that's just him getting ready or trying different things or whatever, because if you think about last season, he won the first race of the season, and then he really didn't do much until it was Homestead. I think he won one more race before that, but he really wasn't ever a factor going into the championship until he won it. Nobody ever thought that he was going to win it, and then he won it. And now that he is a champion, he's like, he could go and win it again at this point. If he might be playing the same exact game that he played last year. You never know. And to me, it seems like it's weird because I would always consider Junior Motorsports to maybe be a little bit better of equipment than Richard Childress Racing, just because of the amount of wins and the speed that they normally show. But I think Tyler Reddick's in a better position than he was last year. So it's really tough to say. It's really tough to put your finger on one of those three. But I'm going to continue with what I said last week, and I will say less convincingly Cole Custer.
You were right about, by the way. He won at Daytona to cap the year off, and then he won at Homestead. So I doubt it, but maybe we'll see. Michael Annett did the same thing for JRM. No, not really. I don't think that. I just got to see something catastrophic happen with that RCR team. I do think they're doing really well, basically because they're putting all their focus in one car. I mean, it seems pretty obvious that even with when the 21 races, it's not the best of the best. They've had Joe Graff Jr. in there. I think that's his name. He's DNQ'd in an RCR car, so that's pretty pathetic. I don't need to remember his name. And then Kaz Grala obviously was in the car this week, and he's been in there I think 4 races this year, and he hasn't gotten a top 10 yet. So I think they're putting all the focus on that 2 car, as they should. That's their only real chance at a title. And I think you're right. I think he's in a better spot now than he was last year, just because I think when he was over there, there was a lot of internal competition of who's going to be the best JRM car. So I think it's going to be one of those things where he's the primary focus. Whereas last year you had Elliott Sadler, you had Sadler was with JRM still
Yes.
last year, right? Then you had obviously Allgaier. So it, I think you're right. That's why he's still the favorite to me. It's going to take something big for me to think otherwise. I do think he's going through a bit of a dry spell. Who knows why? I mean, we're talking about instead of him winning, he's finishing fourth. And we're talking about a guy who would have 4 wins if he didn't overshoot turn 3 on the last lap of Pocono. So, by all means, he's still right in the thick of it. It's just these other 2 guys have been on fire the last 3-4 weeks. So, we'll we'll go back to this every single week. Obviously, it's going to be between these 3 at this point. It's going to take something huge for someone else to show up and show up in a big way. But I mean, once the playoffs start, I think it's going to be pretty exciting because you've mentioned it every single week. The playoffs are set. It's just going to be a matter of who advances each and every week and who might sneak their way in later on, maybe into the round of 8 and then the round of 4. So we'll see. It'll shape up to be a good rest of the year.
As I mentioned before, the Xfinity race was sandwiched in between 2 other races on that day. Yeah, the Xfinity series was the main event. I mean, or was it? I felt like there was maybe a bigger crowd at the race prior to it, which was the modified event, the Eastern Propane and Oil 100 with the NASCAR Whelen Modified Tour. New Hampshire, or rather New England, is well known for their modified heritage, and it definitely showed on the Saturday afternoon, where they had 38 modifieds come out to their
Oh my God, that's awesome.
38 modifieds running in a 100-lap race. I mean, it's pretty much like their Daytona, because they run a lot shorter tracks than that, but at New Hampshire, they're able to pretty much go and use drafting abilities on the long straightaways. So it's really cool to see like the slingshots and the passes that they're able to make. And most of the time, I would say that the modified race is the best race of the weekend. Unfortunately, this modified race was marred by many, many cautions, including one that ended the race. They do have overtime rules, just like in the Cup Series, just like in the Xfinity and Truck Series. But I mean, just looking at, I watched the race. I was up in the press box for the race, and when they were racing, it was good. But the average green flag run was only 6 laps.
Oh no.
And they ran over 40% of the race under caution. It was really, really sad because they just couldn't seem to get out of their own way. I mean, granted, there are 38 modifieds on this track, and most of them run in packs of maybe at most 16 modifieds. That's usually the biggest field that you would see of a modified race at a lot of these shorter tracks. So there was definitely a lot more of them, but they normally put on a much better show. You got to feel for Doug Coby, because it looked like he was in the catbird seat. It looked like he was just waiting to set up the eventual winner of the race, Ron Silk. And they ended up, there was a wreck right at the end on lap 102, the first time they went into overtime. They didn't come around to take the white flag to, signify the end of the race. So they had a wreck, the 32 car of Tyler Ripkema. I don't know. I can't even pronounce that. But he ended up going straight into the turn one wall and ended up breaking the wall. Being that this race was a precursor to the Xfinity race, which was, of course, the main event of the day, as far as their ticket sales go, as far as their viewership is supposed to go, they had to end the race before they could get going again. And they never went back going green. It was definitely I feel like the fans were robbed of a really good finish, and you could hear it in Doug Coby's voice in the post race presser in the media center that he didn't care that the Xfinity guys were there. They should have scheduled it better. They should have figured it out, because the fans definitely got robbed of what could have been an amazing finish. There was an amazing finish the day before in the All-Star race that the modifieds had. I wasn't there for that. This was the race that, of course, counted. But they had like a 4-wide finish in the All-Star race on Friday. And unfortunately on Saturday, because of the time constraints with the Xfinity and the K&N eventually later, they had to work on the wall so that they could get the Xfinity going on time. And Ron Silk was declared the winner after 107 laps, the last 6 of them being run under the yellow flag.
I've always liked watching the modifieds every year they go there, just because, like you said, they have drafting components, and then with the PJ1, I know it's made the racing a lot better for the modifieds. I think that's a huge move that New Hampshire did, was in I don't know why they did what they did with the whole progressive banking years and years and years ago. I think they did it too much. It's way too low down there. So they had to put the PJ1, and it really helps the racing, and it makes the modified race awesome. And every year, I don't know if Ryan Newman entered this year, but he seems to like entering this race. Okay.
Newman and Preece.
Yeah. Well, Preece is like a god up there.
He is.
So
he got the biggest cheers on Sunday for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's just like, he's the junior of New England. So, that doesn't surprise me at all. But I heard that they shortened it from you, and that's disappointing, because I would presume that anyone that showed up on Saturday, the biggest focus would be the modified race, just because it honestly, the racing in that series is so good, just because you have a lot of parity, and you have a lot of guys who are coming from different regions, and they're all coming for this huge event, because it's always a big event. 100 laps there, and that is disappointing. I wonder if they should have, if there's time constraints, I wonder if they should have just ran the Xfinity race first, and then ran the modifieds and then K&N, or shoot, run Xfinity and then have the guys finish the race after. I mean, what's the issue with waiting 30 minutes and then waiting another 2 hours? I mean, they could have easily done something. They could have done something for the guys, because that's just, I never am a fan. They used to do that with ARCA in February. They would have to cut the races short for the shootout. I'm never a fan of a race ending because of time constraints. I think if you're going to have something like that, you should have a big enough gap to factor in something like a red flag. So, I mean, that's really disappointing. I don't know if the K&N race was good. I just know that series, it seems like every single year there's less and less cars, and the ARCA K&N merger couldn't be coming at a better time, because, man, it seems like that series is just shrinking and shrinking on the east and the west end. So, but that's really disappointing to hear, because, man, I've seen some crazy finishes there in the past, and I hate that the fans got robbed like that.
Yeah, and unfortunately the K&N race was it didn't make up for it either. They only had 17 cars on the track, and at the end they only had 11 running on the lead lap. They were so spread out. There was really no racing. I mean, there was, on the last lap, there was an actual fight to the finish between the 21 car of Sam Mayer and the 16 car of the current points leader, Derek Kraus. And those two are battling for the championship. Mayer edged out Kraus for the second position, and they continue to have like a 2-point difference there. That was about the most exciting part of the day, was the last lap, because one, it was over, and two, you had that battle for second. But Chase Cabre, again, Cabre. Okay, Chase Cabre. I apologize. He absolutely dominated this race. He led 60 of the 70 laps, and they had, what, 2 cautions the entire time in the 70 lap event. So it really wasn't much of a race to watch. I ended up I was up in the press box for it, and I stayed up there for the whole thing, but it was like there was no action going on the entire time, and most of the people had already left at that point because it was so hot. I had a friend who made the trip up to New Hampshire and was there as a fan, and he texted me later on and said, yeah, it was just so hot, and I had to leave after the Xfinity race. He didn't miss much in the K&N, unfortunately. Maybe if they had, 10 more cars, it would have been something more. I remember when I went back there in 2016, there was actually a decent amount of cars there, but it was pretty hot then too, and I didn't stick around either. So, it is what it is. It's hard to do a triple header event at some places, just because you're not going to get the same racing in all the races, or the cars react differently to one another, and I don't know. It was sad. It was sad that they didn't get as good of a race as they could have if they would have had more cars. And I'm looking back at it, the 2016 race that I ended up, I maybe caught like the first 15 laps of it before I ended up going. They definitely looked like they had a much better race, where Kyle Benjamin and Corey LaJoie were battling each other then for that win. LaJoie ended up being the winner in 2016, by the way. But yeah, I mean, triple header event. Hopefully the fans that did stay, they got their money's worth, and they felt like they did. But it was.
How much? Do you know how much tickets were for the Saturday event?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. I can try to look it up here. But
Because I mean, for 3 races, I think you're right. If they're doing what they can, I think they're doing what Pocono should do, and get as many races as they can in one weekend for their doubleheader, and create a lot of value. Personally, if I was going to a day of modifieds and Xfinity, I would consider that an absolute win, and the icing on the cake being Can-Am. Despite it being a pretty boring race, I would probably stay for it anyway, just to get my full money's worth. So I mean, even if it was like, say, $30 or $40, I mean, I've gone to short track races. I've gone to New Smyrna Speedway, and they've had super late models, and they've had their local modifieds show up, and their Sportsman Series show up, and I've paid $20-$30 for that, and I thought it was worth it. So I mean, hopefully they had a good price for them. I can't imagine it being more than $45. So kudos for New Hampshire for doing something right, and creating some real value for the fans. That's good for them. Good publicity, at least.
yeah, for sure. I'm looking at their website. They don't have the ticket prices for last weekend up there anymore, but they will be having another race weekend in September, and the prices around that, they're not going to have a national touring series, so they were probably more expensive than this, but general admission was about $45, and they're going to have a triple header in September. It's just not going to include Xfinity. So the tickets are probably around like $55-$60, which for 3 races, it's not terrible. So I would say that people, if they stay for all 3 races, definitely got their money's worth. I mean, even I would say that the first two races would be worth $60 at that point. So, yeah, good on New Hampshire. Definitely enjoyed my time up there. It was just really hot, and that continued into Sunday. But before we get to that, there was another series that was running on Saturday, and it's funny because I joke with my friend Matt. He every time he comes to the racetrack, it rains for some reason. Like when we went to Dover, it rained, and I didn't get to stay for Dover, and I was really sad. He didn't get to stay for Dover either, which was pretty sad. But then there were several races after that, including Daytona, where weather was just a factor, and I think Michigan and all that stuff. So we call it the hashtag course and curse. So we didn't get any precipitation up in New Hampshire, which was good because we got all the racing in. But that precipitation had to go somewhere, and it went to Iowa in a big way.
Yeah, it was. I wanted to talk about it just because the race ran so late, and I wanted to talk about the aspects of the race. There's a lot of uh, imagery online just of how gnarly the storms were. I mean, the Midwest around this time of year, from about April to about September, I mean, it's tornado alley. So it honestly is just par for the course for that region. But man, what a crazy thunderstorm that barreled through Iowa. We talked about Iowa earlier this year being a bad facility because of the lack of concessions or the lack of ability to not bring food other than buying from concessions. But there's nothing they could do as far as accommodating fans for something that severe. But yeah, I briefly wanted to talk about IndyCar because we talk about Cup obviously with the new package. IndyCar's got a pretty recent new car. They brought it up last year. And one of the big things is that they wanted to have something that wasn't so aerodynamically dependent for road courses because they had the same issues as F1 does now, where even at road courses, aero push and dirty air was such a huge component. But man, it set up for a really bizarre race at Iowa. It was pretty much dominated by Will Power and Joseph Newgarden. Power led the first 15 laps or so, and then Newgarden took over, and he pretty much dominated the race. But it was just so interesting to watch because he would, like, after about, say, 10, 15, I think it was like lap 16, he started lapping cars. Just because after about a lap, you could see a huge discrepancy between each car. It's about 5 or 6 tenths. And there was actually a point in the race where Takuma Sato and Sage Karam got into each other, and the full on reason for it was the dirty air he got from the car in front of him, and it caused him to actually go into the marbles. He had to pretty much stop right in front of Sage Karam. So it I don't know why it's so bad for IndyCar, especially with the new car. It's definitely got less downforce than uh, what they had with the DW12. So I, it's just really bizarre that a lot of these series are facing the same problems and they're approaching them in different ways. And so far, it's worked on the road courses. It's definitely worked there. But we went to Indy last year, and the huge issue that they faced was just because it was so hot, the lack of downforce on the nose behind another car, and they kind of had the same issue this year. It got a little bit better as the race went on, but IndyCar's kind of got the same problem that Cup does, where it's the opposite, and we're gonna kind of tie this in with Cup. The road course races have gotten better, and the oval races have gotten worse. Where I mean, there was a point where IndyCar the oval races were an absolute banger to watch. I mean, Pocono was great. Uh, I think the best race literally ever that I've ever witnessed on television was the race at Auto Club in 2015. That race had over 80 lead changes, and it was insane. Now it's just pretty much single file just because of the dirty air. So it's just interesting. Joseph Newgarden won the race, by the way. There was not a whole lot of action besides the fact that it ran at 2:30 in the morning. Uh, I just wanted to tie that race in just because they're running a package uh, that actually did pretty well, in my opinion, at New Hampshire, but it's been pretty bad at the short tracks because of the higher downforce and the inability to have clean air on the nose. So I don't know. I just wanted to talk about that briefly, just because it's a good tie-in. We can definitely talk about Cup now, unless you have anything else to mention.
Well, I love IndyCar. It's definitely one of my favorite racing series out there. But I also like Sleep. And it's crazy that they went racing when they did, considering how late it was. I mean, I guess local time it was still late local time. It was crazy because what they got. I think Eastern time they didn't get the green flag till like 12 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
So
it finished at 2 a.m. Central Time over there. It was pretty late.
yeah, like where we were staying in New Hampshire, we didn't have the best reception as it was. We probably could have watched it on TV in the living room, but we probably would have kept everybody else up. So really, the only option was to watch it on our phones. And maybe one of the guys did watch the race. I'm not sure. I know that I was asleep before midnight. Yeah, I really did look forward to maybe watching that race if it would have went off at the right, the time it was supposed to go off, but it didn't, and it was sad for me to miss IndyCar because I try to catch some IndyCar every week that they race, and I didn't get to catch a single second of it. Good for Joseph Newgarden. He's definitely been the dominant one of the dominant drivers of the season. Looking at the stats here, he led 245 of the 300 laps. Will Power leading 49 of the 300 laps. I don't know what happened to him. Looks like something happened to him because he ended up finishing 15th. So yeah, IndyCar Iowa aero package was bad. But let's talk about New Hampshire, where the aero package was well, I don't want to say good, but I do want to say that it was probably the best race that we've ever had in New Hampshire.
It, I mean, I don't know about that one.
Well, can you think of a better New Hampshire race?
Not off the top of my head, but I think it was pretty par for the course. It definitely had exciting moments. The first stage was awesome as far as the racing goes. I mean, Bush led the first half of it, and then here comes Keselowski, and then here comes Truex to battle Keselowski. So, I mean, I'm sure I could find something. The first one that comes to mind that I know was really good before it got rained out was the race that Logano won. Kurt Busch and Jeff Gordon were battling like crazy the entire race. They were all over each other the whole entire race until it rained. So that's just one that I can think of off the top of my head. But I mean, you're not wrong as far as it being a good New Hampshire race. It was definitely better than I was expecting because with this. I mentioned the PJ1. I thought it was going to help tremendously, and it seemed to as far as getting that inside line some grip. But it still was really hard to pass. It was really hard to stick it down there. You can make it work, but you had to really work on it for a couple laps. So. Yeah, you're definitely right. It was definitely a good race, and I did enjoy it from start to finish. The only part that I missed, ironically enough, was probably the most exciting point with Boyer getting turned, and I forget what else happened. I know Chase had issues, and there was a lot of stuff going on that I missed in the second stage. So, but I mean, I watched the end of the race, and it was fantastic. The setup as far as Harvick taking two and Hamlin having four definitely lent to a better result. I think if Hamlin had the lead from the get-go, he would have pulled out to a pretty substantial lead, and the race would have been just another New Hampshire race. But that's not how it settled.
Well, I mean, that's that. Unfortunately for Hamlin, that's not how it ended up. But that's what it would have been if we didn't have that final caution, because Hamlin was absolutely dominating that race in the third stage. But I'll get to that in a second. Kevin Harvick was the winner, as you mentioned already. It was his first win of the 2019 season, which is surprising considering he won the most races or tied for winning the most races last season at 8. and now we're on race number 20, and this is only his first. So Kevin Harvick, winner, Denny Hamlin. What a hell of a battle at the end. Again, I'll get to that in a second. We start off with the Kyle Busch show in the first stage. Brad Keselowski was the pole sitter for the day, but it didn't matter. Kyle Busch was a little bit better on the get-go. Busch was able to pull out to about a 1.5 lead in the first 10 laps, but then Keselowski started coming back. And it was, I think, 37 laps of straight green flag racing before Brad Keselowski was able to catch and pass Kyle Busch for the lead. He used Bubba Wallace's car as a pick. It was a really tense moment because it looked like Bubba almost was part of an incident there, just where his car was and where Brad was trying to stick his car and where Kyle was trying to stick his car. They ended up going 3 wide briefly, but it all worked out. Kyle ended up losing not only the lead, but he also ended up losing second to his teammate, Martin Truex Jr., and then before the first caution of the day, it looked like Truex was trying to work on Keselowski to get around him, but we ended up, like I said, having that first caution of the day for an Austin Dillon tire issue. He hit the wall pretty decently. Pit strategy shook up the top spots. Eric Jones ended up taking fewer tires, but Kyle Busch was just so strong at the beginning of the race. He made quick work of his Joe Gibbs Racing teammate and ended up winning the first stage, taking the green checkered flag. Stage 2, it was more Kyle Busch. He continued his dominance, and at one point during the stage while I was watching it, I was like, I might as well just order his diecast now for my tiny car shelf because I don't see how he's going to lose. But that's the beauty of NASCAR, is you can't have that mindset because he didn't win. And I'll talk about that in a second. We had another caution. This was caused by Chase Elliott's car. Chase Elliott had some engine issues and dropped some fluid down on the track, and that caused Daniel Hemrick and Daniel Suarez to collide in turn 1. That ended up ending Daniel Hemrick's race, which, sucks for him. It really does. He's had a pretty terrible season for his rookie year. Suarez was able to continue, but Hemrick was just, he got destroyed in that. Kevin Harvick ended up using some strategy to take the lead, but again, Kyle Busch was very, very strong and was able to make another quick pass to get back into the lead. And then we had another caution, and it was a gigantic hit. I mean, literally, like, you saw the car hit so hard you got scared for a second. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. slammed the wall out of turn 2. And that kind of set up for the end of the second stage. Stenhouse parked in the middle of the pits, which gave them a couple extra laps of caution because they had to clear his car before they could open the pits. And by the time it was time to open the pits, it was like, well, now I'm racing. I could be racing for the stage win, or I could be racing for the race win. So Aric Almirola, who doesn't have a race win this season, and about 8 other drivers decided to stay out to try and get some stage points. Kyle Busch, who, like I said, was dominating, he ended up restarting 10th on this restart, and he ended up getting a tire rub by, I don't know who he bounced off of, but he bounced off of somebody, and it caused him to have to pit again at the end of the first stage, which was won by Aric Almirola. The second stage, no, I just went over the second stage. That was the second stage. Aric Almirola won the second stage. Sorry. Kyle Busch had to pit at the end of the second stage, and that pretty much took Kyle Busch out of the chance to winning because it was track position all day. Yeah, we're talking about a really good race at New Hampshire, but it was still really tough to pass. And Kyle Busch was able to get up to about 6th place before his day turned sour again. Denny Hamlin ended up taking over as the dominant car. He ended up leading about 113 laps straight. Kyle Busch ended up bringing out the 7th caution. He got out of the groove, got into the safer barrier. Didn't get a lot of damage, but it did knock his toe out slightly. And he also lost some track position having to fix it, which he was really never able to recover from. Kyle Larson had some bad luck for the 8th and the 9th caution. He ended up, he got below Alex Bowman. And we'll talk about Bowman and the rest of Hendrick in a moment. But Larson kind of dove underneath Bowman to try and get the position, and it's so flat down there that it just didn't stick, even with the PJ1. And Larson slid up and ended up spinning in and putting his rear end into the wall. So Larson had some damage, and then he brought out another caution when he blew a tire and hit the wall even harder. So that set up the end of the race. Denny Hamlin has been dominating this race, just like his teammate Kyle Busch was. But now you've got people who are like, well, we can make it to the end. We don't have to stop. We don't need fuel. Tires aren't really falling off that much. Let's try it. And you had 3 guys stay out: Kevin Harvick, Eric Jones, and Martin Truex Jr. Hamlin pitted, took 2 tires, took enough gas to make it to the finish, and other guys pitted for 2 or 4 tires, and they took the restart. And Denny, of course, restarting in that 4th position, which was key, it was able to put him up into the 2nd spot like right away. And it was on from there. It was Harvick on no tires, and it was Hamlin on 2. And Hamlin, of course, definitely had the faster car, and if he had the track position, would have been, blown the rest of the field away. But because of him being in 2nd and in the dirty air, he had to really work really hard to even get close to Kevin Harvick's bumper. So in the closing laps, they were working through lap traffic, and Harvick kind of got caught up a little bit by the Austin Dillon car, which was multiple laps down. And I think his crew chief, Rodney Childers, was not too pleased about that. That ended up putting Hamlin right on the back bumper of Kevin Harvick going into the white flag lap. Going into turn 1, Hamlin lays the bumper to Harvick, just enough to get him out of the groove. Harvick, he somehow he wasn't, too badly affected by it. It did get him out of the groove. It did slow him up and did allow Denny Hamlin to get onto the inside. But Harvick had the run off the corner, and he cleared him before the turn 3, and he was able to go to the bottom. And I think his whole point for going to the bottom was he wanted to control the exit of the final corner, turn 4. Denny got on the outside, and it was preferred. It was definitely preferred groove, but Harvick just slid up enough and pushed into Hamlin enough where Hamlin didn't have a chance, and Harvick went on and won that race. It was definitely one of the best finishes that I've ever seen at New Hampshire, and like I said, it was a pretty good race, even though we had dominant patches from Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin during it. But I feel like there was definitely a chance for other cars to get involved, like in that first stage when Brad Keselowski was able to catch and pass Kyle Busch for the lead, and when Martin Truex was able to stalk Brad Keselowski for it before the caution came out. You had the differing pit strategies that definitely played a factor into it, with Aric Almirola winning the 2nd stage. So I really did enjoy everything that went down on Sunday. Another hot day in New Hampshire, but definitely a well-deserved win for Kevin Harvick.
I mean, you get a lot of storylines, and I think that's what gives this New Hampshire race a little bit more oomph as far as the rating. I mean, it got a pretty good reception on Jeff Gluck's weekly poll of the week for the race, as far as did you enjoy it or not, and a lot of people said yes. Last time I checked, it was 80-20. I don't know if it finalized that way. So I mean, it got positive reception. Like I said, I did enjoy the race. I want to echo the same sentiments I did last week. I really want to know why the tires are as hard as they are, especially for a track like New Hampshire. It's pretty old, and you'd think it would have enough abrasiveness to allow for some tire wear. I would love to see that, just because I think New Hampshire is one of the few tracks that it, the way it is, degradation would incorporate the comers and goers of a field, because you have to set the car up a certain way. But we just, unfortunately, we didn't see that. So, I mean, the fact that Harvick took two tires was a great move. I mean, the fact that he hasn't won this year is astonishing. They've pretty much taken themselves out of the running as many times as he's had a chance to win. So.
Just for
I'm happy
clarification, though, Harvick didn't pit at all.
he didn't take anything.
He didn't pit at all, Kevin. The thing with him is that his pit crew has let him down so many times. I think Childers like had in the back of his head, let's not lose a race for our pit crew. Let's win a race by not using them. And they didn't even come in at all. There was it was him, it was Jones, and it was Truex who stayed out. And I was damn sure that Eric Jones was getting a penalty on that pit sequence,
Oh yeah,
because
because the commitment cone violation. Yeah, you're right. I
he
remember.
drove through the box, and I could swear to you that that was a penalty in past races, but apparently somebody opened up the rule book and found it not to be, and Eric Jones ended up I feel like that kind of helped the finish, Eric Jones being there, because if he would have got penalized, he would have went to the back. Then he would have restarted third, and Brad would have restarted fourth, and maybe Brad would have been the guy on the outside getting the advantage. And that's what I was, I was starting to type up in Twitter to post, but they ended up not giving the penalty to Eric, which was crazy. But yeah, they didn't pit. The three of them didn't pit, and that's what set up for that finish and that win by Harvick.
See, that's still like, it's still so. Hamlin took two.
Yes.
On the final stop. Okay, that's what it was. Like I said, I was watching the race from work, and uh, I do remember the Eric Jones thing, because I was like, okay, well, he's screwed, and we were talking about it in the group chat, like, oh, he's completely out of it. And I guess it's the rule is you have to full on commit in order for it to be a penalty. You have to have all four tires underneath the box or the cone in order for it to be a penalty if you're not pitting. So, I mean, I think that's fair. Either you are or you aren't kind of deal. It's not like an in between. Oh, you can be penalized either way. So, in the sense of it being black and white, that's as black and white as you can get it. You either are fully committed or you're not. So, I'm fine with that personally. So, um, but I was honestly kind of surprised to see Hamlin struggle as much as he did to get there. He kind of hovered at the 7/10 to 9/10 of a second mark for a pretty good bit of the run. There was a point where he was really close, and then he fell off, and then of course Austin Dillon created another opportunity for him. But I mean, I do think that Childers made the right call, whether or not it was for two or for none. Getting him out front was the most paramount thing ever, because uh, he even mentioned it in the interview. He was really tight behind other cars, and the reason why he's tight behind other cars is because the aero push. So the best way to win is to stay out front and keep it there. So he did the right thing as far as strategy goes. I really thought Jones was going to be in the right place to be, just because he had showed that he had pure speed all day. He was right up there with the top four in the first stage, and he showed speed all day. So I really thought he was going to do something, and I guess I was wrong there. But it the finish was great. It was everything I could have asked for. I would have loved to see a photo finish. I would have loved to see how the finish would have transpired if Hamlin stayed on his outside bumper coming to the line. I think with the way side draft is, and I think we would have had a pretty good race, and I think Hamlin would have pulled it off. But uh, it's great for Harvick, just because he desperately needed to find some luck, and he made it on his own with the no pit call. So it it honestly could be dangerous for the rest of the cup teams, just because SHR has not found their way into victory lane yet this year. Now they have, and Harvick's not the only guy that has shown speed this year. Almirola has been fast. Boyer's shown signs of speed. He showed really good speed at Texas. So I mean, he's got the speed at the mile and a half when he needs it. And he led at Kentucky, despite his pitch strategy, but he still led. So maybe this is going to be good fortune for SHR to kind of put themselves in the mix with Penske and Toyota for the championship, and then. I mean, I think obviously they've leapfrogged Hendrick just because of the consistency they've had. We'll talk about Hendrick in a second, but I think it's a great win. And I think you're right. I wouldn't say it's the best race. I'm sure there's another race that's better.
Yeah.
It's got to be out there. I mean, in recent memory, this New Hampshire's been pretty forgettable. I think there's a reason why the attendance has dropped pretty substantially. It used to be one of the most popular races of the year. It used to hold a damn near sellout crowd for both races. Now it looks like I'd say about 80% of the field. Oh God, dogs! It's about an 80% attendance rating for Sunday.
Um, I mentioned it last week to prove a point. This week, I'm still gonna mention it just for speaking facts. There were more quality passes last year than there were this year. And for anybody who doesn't know what a quality pass is, I said it last week, but I'll repeat it this week. Quality pass is a pass that is made while running in the top 15 under green flag conditions. So there were more quality passes throughout the whole field last season. So I mean, we talk about the package every freaking week, and I mean, this was a good race, but there was less quality passing. There was less passing overall. I wasn't at the race last year, so I can't talk on what I saw except for what I saw on the television, which most of the time on television they don't show much of anything except for like the leader. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what happened this year. But from what I saw looking at the racetrack, I saw a lot of racing. I saw a lot of there wasn't that much passing, but for the racing that was going on, it was like they were able to catch each other and they were able to, work on each other. And it did take a while for passes to get completed, but I mean, sometimes that's a good thing. It's not all the time. I'd like to, see people struggle less with it. I'd like passing to be maybe a little bit easier, maybe would make the racing a little bit better. But that I just wanted to bring that up just because I looked at it last week and I just wanted to see if it was holding true this week, because Kentucky normally is a terrible race, and those stats could back that up, that the 2018 version of Kentucky was not that good of a race. You didn't get that many quality passes, but you got a hell of a lot of quality passes this year at Kentucky. Not the same for New Hampshire.
Well,
So,
you mentioned it before we talked about before we even started the show. It seems like this package has flipped the script. Good races have been not so good. Richmond's the first one that comes to mind.
sad.
Yeah, sorry to Richmond. And even though the race was good by the scale of rating a New Hampshire race, I don't take the whole quality passes thing into much thought, just because I don't know if it takes restarts into consideration. That's such a huge factor, especially at the 1.5 milers. Side draft is so important in executing a pass. You could probably have 3 or 4 passes between one battle before it ends up being settled. So it's just something that I can't really take, and I like I said, I don't know how it fully, if it's at the line or what, but I I know Kyle Busch post race was really frustrated that it was a lot harder to pass this year, and I mean it makes sense, and they echoed that at Dover. I know it was a huge issue at Dover, and obviously they're going a lot slower. They're about 40 miles an hour slower in the corner here, but it doesn't surprise me to hear that it was a lot harder to pass. I mean, obviously, with a bigger spoiler, there's going to be a bigger wake behind the car if you're trailing someone. So it doesn't surprise me that it was harder to pass, just because dirty air is such a huge factor in this package. So, I mean, that stat doesn't. That's something I honestly would expect, and that's. I mean, it is what it is. We're going to where is it, Pocono, next week, and I know they're going to apply, excuse me, the PJ1 there to open up the groove a little bit. I'm hoping that improves it because it needs it in the worst way to get the guys out of the groove per se, out of the wake of the car in front of them. Because the only thing that Pocono really has going for it is that it has long straightaways, and it seems like the way this package drafts, it still has that bubble effect after about a car length. So we'll see if that improves it. But I mean, as far as New Hampshire goes, like I mentioned a million times, I did enjoy watching it. There was a lot of storylines involved in it, and one thing that we haven't really brought up yet was Hendrick. Hendrick was what an abysmal weekend for them.
It was definitely the big sad for Hendrick. You had both William Byron and Alex Bowman go into backup cars for some things that happened on Saturday, or Friday actually. Well, Friday for Bowman because of qualifying, he ended up blowing the drive shaft out and then ended up ripping a bunch of components out and causing a big smoke show, causing him to qualify in 37th position, not even getting a lap in. So they had to go to a backup car for Bowman's qualifying. On Saturday, both Alex Bowman and William Byron had to go to backup cars. William Byron got out of the groove and into the wall, and then Alex Bowman got out of the groove and into the wall. And Bowman now was on his second backup car, his backup car to his backup car. And then you had Jimmy Johnson and you had Chase Elliott, who, they were all right. They weren't doing too much. Bowman ended up going into Johnson's backup car because they didn't have any other cars for Bowman. You're only allowed to bring two. I don't know if you're only allowed to bring two, but you're only supposed to have two at the track. They only pack two for you. So they ended up taking one of Jimmy's Ally cars. They took all the stickers off of that, and then they wrapped it with the parts and pieces of the Exalta scheme. So it worked out to be a really cool looking Exalta car for Alex Bowman instead of their normal like navy blue base. It was a complete black base, and I thought it looked better than the regular car in my opinion. But that was because of being in a backup to a backup. So then you go into the race itself, and you got Byron and Bowman at the back. Chase really isn't a factor at all during the race, and Jimmy's, he's kind of there, but he's kind of not. And then more disaster strikes for him. Chase Elliott ends up having his engine issue, like I mentioned before. He dropped the oil or the water or whatever it was. Something burst and dropped some fluid on the track, and that's what took Hemrick out of the race and sent Suarez into it as well. So Chase lost multiple laps fixing that, and then Jimmy had a similar issue. I think he got his from hitting somebody on the restart, where that ended up puncturing something or whatever. But Jimmy had a similar issue where he was on pit road for multiple laps getting that fixed. So you had the two guys who didn't go to backup cars having issues early in the race, having to lose multiple laps. And then you had the two guys that did go to backup cars or backup cars. They just really weren't ever factors. William Byron was the highest finisher of the group. He finished in 12th. Alex Bowman in his backup car finished in 14th. And then you had the other two finish multiple laps down. You had Elliott finishing in 29th and Jimmy finishing in 30th. So it really was just a rough weekend for Hendrick Motorsports. When Alex Bowman won at Chicagoland a few weeks ago, we were talking about Hendrick is back. They're definitely, watch out. And then you look at New Hampshire and you're like, whoa, they fell off again. And that may not be because of the equipment. That just maybe because of just they just didn't get the New Hampshire setup right. And I'm hoping it's just a one-off, because I really do want to see them continue to have success. I really would like to see them do well at Pocono this weekend and moving forward, because I think the sport needs Hendrick to be good. Not just because I like Hendrick Motorsports, but because I think NASCAR does better when a Hendrick car is contending for victories.
Yeah, I'm a little biased as well, being a Gordon fan. I was incredibly thrilled to see Bowman win, and I'd like to see at some point William Byron come through with a victory as well. Uh, I can't see this just. I think it's a fluke week. Because man, what a bizarre week. I was trying to figure out when was the last time I could. What was the last time I could think of just off the top of my head that Hendrick had a pretty bad weekend, like just overall from a just a engineering standpoint and bad luck. And the race that came to mind was the 2002 Talladega race, where not only did every single Hendrick engine blow up, but every single satellite team that they gave engines to blew up as well. It was the most bizarre thing I've seen probably since I started watching NASCAR. As far as like an engine failure standpoint, it was bad. But I mean, we'll see coming to Pocono. I wonder if they're sacrificing R&D for the shorter tracks, because I feel like that's one place where if there's like an aero advantage or disadvantage, it's going to be kind of hidden at a shorter track like Loudon for like because last year it seemed like the Camaros didn't have the same speed as the Fords and the Chevy and the Toyotas. So maybe they're putting a lot of R&D work into the mile and a halves and the high bank tracks, and they're kind of neglecting the rest. I don't know for sure. I'd have to talk to someone at Hendrick, but we'll see come Pocono. I can't imagine this happening 2 weeks in a row, but we've seen lightning strike twice before in terms of misfortune and consistently bad conditions with the team. So we'll see. But personally, I just don't see it happening a second week in a row.
I hope not. I mean, looking at the first Pocono race, you had Chase Elliott with a fourth place finish, and you had William Byron with a ninth place finish. So, I mean, if they just bring what they had already brung, we should, still see them have some type of success over at Pocono Raceway this weekend. So, I don't expect them to go anywhere backwards on that. But it is interesting now because of Jimmy Johnson's bad week. He is now no longer in the top 16. He's actually tied for 17th with Daniel Suarez, and he is 17 points outside of the top 16. We all know the top 16 will move on to the playoffs, and Jimmy Johnson's never missed one of those. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can regain that those lost points this weekend at New Hampshire and close back in. Because I mean, you look at it, Clint Boyer, as you mentioned earlier, he didn't have that good of a race. He ended up colliding with Martin Truex Jr. at the end of the second stage. So they had their issues. So Clint Boyer lost some points. Eric Jones ended up gaining a lot of points. Ryan Newman ended up gaining a lot of points. Kyle Larson ended up losing a lot of points. It was really an up and down day for the bubble, because Jimmy lost some points, Suarez lost some points, and Menard, he's within a earshot at this point. He's moved ahead of Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who had a really down day with his big wall hit. So, barring no new winners for the remaining 6 races in the regular season, I again am really interested to see how this is all going to play out, because I wouldn't have Newman going in, but Newman's got he's 15th now. Bowyer's 16th. If Bowyer keeps having his bad luck, Bowyer's going to be out. If Jimmy keeps having his bad luck, he's definitely going to be out. If Suarez catches fire out of nowhere because, he just finds something and he starts getting some points, he's going to be in, and we might have Bowyer and Johnson out. And if Jones ends up going backwards on his progression, he could be out again. So Larson's there too. Larson's right on the bubble. If he keeps having his bad luck, he could be out. It's just it's a crazy time for this bubble as it stands, and I'm probably now a little bit more interested to see what's going to happen in the Cup Series than I am as what's going to happen in the Truck Series, because Truck Series has really been intriguing to me, but now Cup, coming down to it being this close, I'm really looking forward to seeing how it plays out.
Well, we got what, 6 guys within a race of each other. You got Larson, Jones, Newman, Bowyer. Bowyer actually ended up being uh, pretty lucky considering everyone else that's behind him either was around him. I think Suarez and Bowyer pretty much finished next to each other in the standings at New Hampshire, and then Johnson had his misfortune, and then of course Stenhouse had his wreck. So he ended up being pretty okay, and he's the bubble man right now. What does he have? A 17-point advantage. I mean, the stage is set up, um, we're gonna probably see more of the same from the guys in the bubble area, staying out, trying to get stage points at the expense of winning the race, or being out of contention to win the race. So I don't know. We'll see. But the way the stages go, you can have a 60-point swing in no time with the way it sets up. So even if Larson has a bad week, he could fall from 13th to 17th or 18th in points real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I think you're right. Overall, it's starting to set up a little bit better than Trucks, just because I do think Trucks is still as entertaining as it was the whole time, just because any of those guys that are outside could win at any moment. I don't know if it can be said for a lot of these guys that are running for the bubble spot. So Pocono is going to be interesting. Watkins Glen's going to be really interesting because, once again, strategy and setting up for the stages is going to be really important for these guys. So it's going to be a matter of points are going to mean a lot more than it has in the last few years. And I like that. I really do like it. So it creates something that we can all watch and witness as the season progresses. I do think, man, Newman's been on a tear. 8 top tens this year, and that's definitely outperforming what it was doing last year. So he's definitely bringing more to the table for that 6 machine, and he's showing that he can get it done. And he might just stick it out and qualify for the playoffs this year.
He's definitely out. Wow, I can't talk tonight. He's outperforming his teammate, who only has 2 top 10s this year, and Stenhouse is currently sitting 20th in the standings. It was interesting. I was listening to the radio on my drive home, and they were talking to Wheels, Mike Wheeler. He is Matt DiBenedetto's crew chief, and DiBenedetto had a 5th place finish at New Hampshire. Matt's sitting like 24th in the point standings right now, so he's not. I wouldn't completely say he's out on points, but he's pretty much out on points. But he's got, the TRD link, kind of like the Furniture Row guys had last year. I'm not saying DiBenedetto could be a spoiler. It's not the same level. No, it's not. But I mean, I'm not saying that he could play spoiler, but I'm also saying that anything can happen. And Mike Wheeler's one of the best crew chiefs in the garage area by far. He definitely knows how to take equipment and make the most out of it. DiBenedetto now having the most top 5s, he has only 2 top 5s of his career this year, in probably 2nd-tier equipment. I mean, if things happen, I'm not just talking about DiBenedetto either. It could be Austin Dillon, who's won on lucky races before. It could be Chris Buescher, who's won lucky Pocono before. I mean, if we have fog again and Chris Buescher's in the right spot, you never know. Um, I the winners could come given the right circumstances. And even if we get a winner, that's still not going to mean much for the bubble because you've got so many people on that bubble. You got 13th to 18th, like you said. So a new winner, you just move that bubble down a little bit. Now you got 14th to 19th racing for those positions, and now there's less of them. So I'm really got my eyes glued to these point standings. And I mean, if I look at it now and I had like a gun to my head and said who's gonna make it and who's not, I think Newman's gonna make it, but I don't think Boyer's gonna make it. I think Boyer's just not having the right season to be able to do it. I do think that there's no way Jimmy Johnson's gonna miss it. I don't think that's I I can't even put that into my vocabulary. I don't think Jimmy Johnson has the capabilities to not be in the playoffs. So I think as it stands, the only change we'll see by the end of the regular season is Jimmy Johnson in, Clint Boyer out.
Only time will tell. I know we were talking about Jimmy Johnson's little slump here, and I don't think it's his fault. You have a new crew chief for him this year. Is it Kevin Meandering is in that car,
Mm-hmm.
crew chief in it this year, uh, and then of course it seemed towards the last 3 or 4 years there was definitely a soured relationship between him and Canals, and I think it was good for both of those guys to have a new, uh, some new environment as far as a working relationship, and maybe just having it be just a regular friendship. So I kind of compared it to when Gordon was in this kind of predicament where he was out of the points, and it was never this bad, but not really winning races, always being oh so close, but not quite. Because I mean, Johnson's only got 8 top 10s this year, and we're talking about it's still 8 top 10s. That's respectable in 20 races, but we're talking about the 7-time champion that used to clip 5 and 6 wins in the first half of the year. So it's it's just bizarre that we're talking about him even being on the bubble, but it's just crazy that it's the whole entire organization. Something's got to happen in a big way at Hendrick in the next year or two, because at some point it's going to be the same thing that Roush kind of faced, where they started to struggle on results, and the sponsors won't come like they used to. So they got to figure it out soon. Uh, I can't say off like as strongly as you do, as you feel that Johnson will not miss it. I still think he can, just because Stewart Haas are the better cars right now. Objectively, they are doing a lot better than Hendrick. And even though I think Suarez isn't the driver that Johnson is, I think Boyer, his issue has been more luck than anything. And I think if they can point in the right direction, they'll be fine. But Johnson's got to have speed, and they just haven't had it this year.
Yeah, you're right. I do agree with you that the Stewart Haas cars are definitely better equipped to have, a better chance at making the playoffs. But I mean, Clint Boyer only has 12 lead lap finishes right now. Jimmy Johnson has 13. So I mean, they're definitely, you know, it's going to be close. I look at other statistics in this area as well, where Clint Boyer has a 2.5 position better average starting position than Jimmy Johnson, which is, evident of his speed, but he also has a full position less of an average finish. Jimmy's average finish is 15.1, Clint's is 16.1. And that more or less, I guess, that goes together with his luck, which he hasn't had much of. But I mean, you do create your own luck. I think you said that last week. You create a lot of your own luck, and that incident that he had with Martin Truex, he just came up. Truex had nowhere to go. Truex was like against the wall, and yeah, they were in a 3 wide position, but there was definitely it looked like there was more room low than there was high, and Boyer kind of just drifted up into the lane of the 19, and they collected each other at New Hampshire. So you kind of create your own luck sometimes, and I feel like maybe if Boyer was, or maybe a spotter was a little bit more attentive of the situation, we'd be talking about Boyer getting a really good finish at New Hampshire, and not about him wrecking and ending up with a 20th place finish at the Magic Mile. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm definitely gonna stick to my guns. I'm gonna book it down that Jimmy Johnson's gonna be making the playoffs, and maybe Boyer does too. Maybe Boyer does too, and maybe Larson falls out, or maybe somebody else falls out. Maybe Newman ends up, his magic comes to an end, and he falls out. But I definitely cannot fathom Jimmy Johnson not making the playoffs in whatever reality that it is. But we'll move on from that. I think we've talked as much as we can about everything that happened at New Hampshire this weekend.
I agree.
I definitely I enjoyed the hell out of the weekend, and I definitely took in everything that I could. But for the last time, it was fucking hot. And I'm glad to be moving on to talking about Pocono this upcoming weekend, where hopefully it won't be as hot. And we got our first taste of Pocono tomorrow night, which by the time this podcast comes out, it'll probably be already over. But Pocono for the iRacing Peak Antifreeze Series, they're going to be there for their race, and it'll be interesting to see how they conquer the tricky triangle in the simulating world. That should be maybe it'll be a better race than we would think, just because of their package being a little bit different than the actual package. I feel like maybe sometimes you get a little bit better racing on the computer than you do in real life, but we'll see, I guess.
The draft definitely means more on the iRacing package than it does in real life, just because they don't simulate the bubble effect. And I feel like the draft strength, it actually comes into play at about, I think it's like a second and a half, because I've raced the package during NIS weeks and stuff like that during their sessions. And by the way, 82 degrees is going to be the high on Sunday, 80 degrees on Saturday, so you're not going to roast
Woo!
at Pocono. But I think it should be fun. I think it's one of the races that'll definitely be better on the sim than in real life. Pocono, I don't know what it is. People seem to enjoy going there, and they get the attendance. But man, Pocono is boring as hell on TV. And I didn't mind the what's it called back in the day where people would spread out and stuff. Just knowing that like sometimes a guy would nail the setup and the rest wouldn't. So. I mean, we'll see. Like I mentioned earlier, the PJ1 was applied, and you can find pictures of it online. And we'll see if that helps. I can't imagine it being much better, but it's got to be better in some way. It's going to be hot enough, I think, to bring it into play. So we'll see how it works.
Zach Sterniolo from the Pocono Record was actually on site and took some video of the application of the PJ1 and the tire drag being dragged on the Pocono racing surface. So if you're out there, go ahead and go to Twitter and go follow Zach Stir and check that out, because he's definitely the leading authority when it comes to anything in Pocono. So I look forward to it, because it's the first time that they've done this, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago when they had the grip strip at Pocono. That was really awesome. I loved it. I looked forward to racing it on the computer, and I look forward to watching it in real life. and I feel like maybe they might be recreating it, but in all three corners now. So it'll be interesting. I hope I hope I forget who it was, but one of the drivers, it might have been Gregson actually, said that it doesn't matter that they're putting it up there. Maybe it wasn't Gregson because he's not racing this weekend, but somebody said that it doesn't matter that they're putting it up there because nobody's going to use it. And I hope that's not true. I hope that somebody ventures up there and finds that it is way faster, and then you get people going up there and using it up, and then you got different lanes, and that's the whole point of this is to get that. So I hope that it works out very well, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. I should be there this weekend. I haven't really confirmed my plans yet, but hopefully it works out that I don't miss my first Pocono race since 2014, and I can get over there because it's the closest racetrack to me, and I love being at the racetrack.
I mean, I hope for your sake it's better. I think they're gonna have to use it at least in the uh, restarts, and I think if 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 there's any second groove created from it, it's an absolute win because they need to have an ability to get out from behind the cars in front of them. But I think it's going to be pretty bad, regardless. I didn't like the Pocono race uh, earlier this year, and Pocono needs. I think the best thing that can make Pocono better is find a car from 1980 and run it there because the man, if you look at old footage of the older races like an Ontario Raceway and stuff like that, uh, man, it didn't matter what track they ran. The racing was insane if they could draft, and maybe the Gen 7 will be the ultimate savior for Pocono. But we'll worry about that in 2021. I'm excited to see if it works at all. My expectations are low, but it would be nice to see it work.
I agree. I definitely do. One last note that I wanted to make here. I know you don't like talking about him, but it is interesting to note. I'm trying to pull up the tweet here because I forgot to earlier. Adam Stern tweeted before regarding the NASCAR Heat Pro League. Yeah, I know. But he tweeted before that NASCAR declined to join the joint venture between 704 Games and the Race Team Alliance that owns the Heat Pro League, per sources. But I mean, NASCAR, it's weird because they're deeply involved, but they're not an owner of this league. So it's not actually NASCAR that runs the NASCAR Pro Series League. They're already involved with NASCAR Peak Antifreeze Series. It says they're worried or wary about becoming an equity partner in this esports league because it's already involved with a separate esports league, and I guess they don't want to cross streams. So I honestly, it's weird to see that they've got their name and they've been promoting it so much, but they're not even owners of it, and that's really weird to see that.
Well, good for NASCAR for actually making a good decision for once, because I think it's honestly it's a detriment to the image of Jesus, what the hell's going on behind me, of NASCAR to have something like that be your focal point of your esports platform. So I think it's a good move to more or less focus on NASCAR. Man, NASCAR Heat is a joke, in my opinion. And every time I would go on NASCAR's webpage or Facebook or see it on Twitter, I just remember seeing that clip of what was it, Watkins Glen, and our good buddy Justin Brooks was driving, and then there was someone else by the name of Wow That's Garbage, and I'm like, wow, what an appropriate name for this league to have someone named Wow That's Garbage. So I mean, it sucks that the people that are involved are not going to be they're not going to be pleased to hear that announcement. But I don't think they deserve it at all to be associated with NASCAR in any way, other than the fact that they have the naming rights for the game itself. That's it.
It's I can't remember where I saw it, or I can't remember, and I don't even, I it's hard to talk about because you know we we don't want to like talk about things that are outside of our jurisdiction here, and NASCAR Heat 3 is definitely outside my jurisdiction. I definitely don't know enough about it to want to say anything wrong, but I feel like it's even been said before that NASCAR Heat 3 is just, it's not an esports ready like platform. Like it's not a complete enough game where like they should be promoting it the way that it gets promoted, with multiple factors, including like their actual like it's not a NASCAR esports thing should be more professional than it is, and it's not, and it's sad to see because you got the 24 drivers, or the 28 drivers, or players, I guess you can call them gamers at this point because most of them use the controllers, but the they worked really hard to perfect their craft, and they had to do a lot to be even considered for getting drafted. And then they get drafted and they have these races, and these races are like pretty much complete jokes because they just they don't look professional at all. They're swerving left and right. You look at, like, you compare it to the iRacing broadcast, and that looks like an actual race. Like I can put that side by side with the actual Cup Series race, and I asked my coworkers which one's real and which one's fake, and they're like, aren't they both real? Like you don't get that with NASCAR Heat. You get the swerviness because you got the guys that are using the controllers, and they're faster using the controllers somehow. And I know we've had that discussion amongst our group that I had a wheel, and I think one of our friends Josh was using a wheel, and then everybody else was on controller, and like the controllers were outdoing the two of us on the wheels, or whatever. And it's just, I feel like if you're gonna be a proper esport and you're gonna promote something like that, I feel like the equipment should not be something as arcadish as a controller. But I don't know. I might be just spoiled by the amount of years that we've had running a very professional league at FTF, in the NR 2003 simulator, and also all the years watching the iRacing Pro Series, the past decade, and everything that they've been able to accomplish. And just seeing this, it's almost like a little bit of jealousy watching this league come out of nowhere on this platform that doesn't truly deserve it and have the reception that it does. It's just sort of infuriating, and I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I want to like eNASCAR Heat, and I want to be able to want to cover it. And honestly, I'm gonna be, I if things go my way, I probably will end up starting to write about it. But at the same time, it's like, why am I writing about this when it's such a freaking joke?
Well, I agree with you. It is kind of infuriating and nerve wracking to see such a like. I mean, there are guys that we've raced on NASCAR '03. At least with me, I raced with against Justin Brooks, and the dude definitely had some talent back in the day. I don't know how genuine it was. I've heard some rumors that he had cheated in the past, but that's neither here or there. But we know Drake Alvarado, or Diego Alvarado. So I mean, I don't like seeing those guys lose the opportunities, but at the same time, I don't think they should have even been presented one at the high level that it was presented as from the get go. I would love to see all the efforts that they're putting into that, like Hendrick and JTD. JTG already has an iRacing team, but I would love to see Hendrick in iRacing. I think it would be awesome. I mean, we already have JRM, Roush, Gibbs. It's just JTG, like I mentioned, Wood Brothers. I would love to see all these teams have uh, legitimacy on the iRacing side instead, just because it's obviously a better platform for talent and a better platform for a more authentic representation on the online side of things. So we'll. I don't think that series is going to go away, but I really hope. I hope NASCAR puts in a lot of money towards iRacing and gives these guys the opportunity to run because they run from a. If we're talking from a like a time perspective, these guys are testing 10, 12, 20 hours a week. The guys that are building these setups don't really get anything in return unless they have some kind of built-in contract with the drivers if they win anything. I hope that there's some point where these guys can run this as a full-time effort for their sake because I can't imagine it being really fun to have a 40-hour work week, or in your case, maybe a 50 or 60-hour work week, and then coming home and testing for 2, 3, 4 hours, and then doing the same thing all over again the next day, and then you run the race, and then you have to do it all over again. So I hope it, for their sake, it's better uh, from a monetary standpoint.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. But we're looking. I'm looking at the clock here, and it is currently 7 minutes to midnight. And we've been going on for almost 2 hours. This might be our longest episode. Crazy enough as it is.
That's surprising.
Very surprising because we really didn't have that many topics to talk about. But we talked very long, I guess, about the topics that we did have. But I enjoyed our episode. I'm looking forward to talking with you this week about maybe bringing some changes to our podcast. So everybody out there in the listening world, definitely stay tuned. We might be changing up our format. We might be changing up, how we do things. We might be bringing people in. Who knows? Either way, I look forward to it. I look forward to this every week, and
it might get dirtier if you get my drift.
Yeah, it could get dirtier. It was a little bit dirtier today, but those will be bleeped out this week. Maybe not going forward. Who knows? But we'll keep it PG for today. You got anything else you wanna add before we sign off here?
Nah, I have tomorrow off, and I want to at some point showcase this whole sim rig that I have built. So maybe I'll do that tomorrow, and I'll slap a link somewhere for people to see. Maybe I'll throw it in the Twitter because I would love for people to see it and get some inspiration for their setup, just like how you posted yours in Sim Racer's garage. So that's pretty much the only thing I got left for the week as far as like my responsibilities. So I'll be working on that tomorrow, and then hopefully it'll look nice and snazzy for the people to look at and be jealous about. So
Yeah, I've got to work tomorrow. I normally have off on Tuesdays, but I got to work tomorrow because I went to the racetrack and I'm going to the racetrack. So, anyway, that's the end of our episode. If you want to catch it on any of our platforms, don't forget to subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Play Music. We're here on YouTube as well. I might be cutting this up a little bit differently as well. I'll see how my editing goes tomorrow and Wednesday, if it goes into Wednesday, just because I am working tomorrow. But we'll see how it all goes. Thank you all for listening. I'm Justin Melillo. That's Kevin McAdams. Everybody have a good rest of the week.
goodbye.